One of my most memorable trips of all time was in July 2018 when I landed on a lovely sandy beach on the island of Oronsay to the west of Jura. It was my first visit to the island and it was during a glorious heatwave. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough fuel to circumnavigate Oronsay and Colonsay, but I did promise myself that one day I would return and do the full round. 3 years later, during a heatwave in July 2021, I finally fulfilled that promise, and this video is a story about the trip. In fact, this video is more than just going around Colonsay. I travelled 250 miles from Tinault, round Jura, Colonsay and Gia, as shown in the map. It took me 4 days in fantastic weather to achieve my goal. Like all my adventures now, it started at Kelly's Pier in Tinault. It was slow tide at 11 AM, so I launched the boat at 9, parked it at the end of the pier while I took my car and trailer home, then walked back to the beach. This meant I had no worries of a car left on the shore. The forecast for the next few days was full sun and light winds, so I was slightly disappointed to find low cloud, high humidity, but the sea was flat enough, so I was happy enough. The low cloud began to lift as I headed down Loch Etive towards the Connell Bridge, where the loch enters the Firth of Lorne and the open sea, which is where I wanted to be. I had 125 litres of fuel on board, giving a range of almost 300 miles, and I also had all the time in the world to go where I pleased. And like a dog marking its new territory, I wanted to push the local boundary to the limits. I was happy as a sandboy heading down the Firth of Lorne towards Easdale, and I felt I could adventure forever, gliding across such a smooth sea surface. It was now a glorious morning, and I saw the low cloud around Easdale after passing Carrera, but presumed it too would clear like the low cloud in Loch Etive. And it did clear from Inch Island as I passed it. In fact, I thought the low cloud in the hills and the mainland made it look very atmospheric. It wasn't until I had passed through the Sound of Easdale that it suddenly dawned on me that this was no low-lying cloud but a thick sea har. Visibility dropped dramatically as I stumbled forward like a blind man wondering what way to go, turn back or keep on going. I don't have any electronic chart plotters, so rely on map and compass bearings. I spent most of my life wandering around Rocky Mountain top, so have no worries navigating at sea with the same method. I also had the advantage that I'm still in very familiar waters, so knew that even the occasional glimpse of a headland would help with the navigation. At times the heart thinned enough to give me sight of familiar landscapes. My biggest worry was meeting another boat in the thicker fogs. To reduce that risk to a minimum, and as I have a very shallow draft in the boat, I kept as close to the land as I could, keeping an eye on my depth sounder as I went. I'd originally planned to go through the Corrie Brecon, but because of conditions decided it would be a bit risky, so opted to pass through the Grey Dogs instead, pass the western side of Scarborough, cross the Great Race of the Corrie Brecon, and then proceed down the western side of Jura. Despite the atrocious visibility, I found the entrance to the Grey Dogs easily enough. I only hoped the standing waves that guard the narrow passage had eased off, as the still flooding tide should be nearing its end. I can only describe the trip through the Grey Dogs as a ride through a washing machine, as I have no idea how rough the water was, as I couldn't see a thing. Following the coast of Scarborough was little better, but at least the sea was calmer. I knew the next section could prove challenging, as it meant crossing about 2 miles of open water between Scarborough and Jura, and it is known as the Great Race of the Corrie Brecon. I presumed the last of the flooding tide would sweep my boat out to sea, and I would need to steer towards the Corrie Brecon whirlpool in order to compensate. Just how much compensation was needed was difficult to say, as I couldn't see a thing. All I really knew was I expected some rough water before reaching Jura on the other side of the Great Race. I breathed a sigh of relief when the coastline of Jura appeared through the mist, and I recognised Elan Moor, which proved my compensation course had been spot on. I could now relax as I was clear of the strong tidal flows of the area. Visibility also improved a little, so I decided to pull into Glengarrisdale Bay for a well-earned rest and decide what to do next. And that was assuming I could find Glengarrisdale Bay. And that proved relatively easy, considering I had just successfully navigated the Grey Dogs and the Great Race in a thick mist. I couldn't resist having a nosy into Glengarrisdale bothy to see if anyone was around. I was desperate to tell someone that I had just successfully passed the missed challenge of my West Coast 250 sea route. Alas, it was deserted, so I had to keep it to myself. Besides, I really only wanted to pass some time to see if a sea mist would lift and let me see at sea again. I soon got bored watching sea mists come and go, so jumped back into the boat and started to make my way to Loch Tarbet, my favourite camping spot in Jura. finally I broke free from the claustrophobic mist. The sun was out and I had a smooth sea to skim over. I just loved the rugged and remote west coasts of Jura, so now started to savour the journey. The land is totally unspoiled by man. There are no roads or houses here. It's a place where only deer and goats roam. Mile after mile, and not a single fence post or telegraph pole in sight. There are plenty of cliffs with lots of caves, big smooth bouldered beaches and the occasional sandy one too. Sometimes seagulls and the occasional eagle can be seen swooping in the air. Then the mist took it all away from me again, but not for long this time, as I knew I was near Loch Tarbert. And when I spied ruined Talon Cottage, the first sign of humans since Glenbarradale Bothy, I knew I'd arrived at my favourite camping ground. I parked my boat and kept it afloat in my favourite bit, sheltered from wind and waves from all directions. Then stretched my legs by taking a walk to the cottage to see if anyone was around. The seaward side cottage belongs to the Jura estate and I sometimes see the guys who use it, but there's no one home. The other side's a bothy open to public use, and I look inside and notice it had been cleaned up since my last visit. The beds had been restrung and a little bird had built its nest in a stag's skull. It was not at home either. Back outside the mist was clearing nicely and a warm blue sky replaced the drab grey clouds. I set up camp in my normal spot beside the shore, then cooked my meal of burger, tomato and shrooms in a roll, washed down with lashings of black gravy. Yep, it's a hard life being an adventurer. I then took a walk to help my stomach settle my unhealthy diet. I went to the cairn on the hill at the entrance of Loch Tarbert to admire the views. 10 miles across the sea I could clearly see the islands of Oronsay and Colonsay, which I intended to circumnavigate the following day. I wanted to visit the priory in Oronsay, where many of the ancient gentry of Argyll were taken to be buried. The corpses would have been brought by boat to Jura, then stored in the cool shade of the caves until the weather allowed them to be taken across to Oronsay. As it was still early evening, I went a walk along the coast to visit some of the caves. Many years ago, several of the caves were home to Jura people, and traces of makeshift beds and fire pits can still be found. Nowadays they are home to the wild goats and deer that seek shelter in them. The floor is thick with their dried poo pellets, so not a place for a night's camp nowadays. In another cave close by, it is believed a religious recluse lived in this cave, possibly not long after St. Columba set up his monastery in Iona. Although not obvious at first, on close inspection the walls are covered in little crosses scored into the stone. And now that my evening dinner had settled deep in my stomach, I sat watching the sun go down over Ormsay and Colonsay. I was looking forward to visiting them in the morning. Thanks for watching, and I do hope you will return to watch part 2 of my West Coast 250-mile route.